Known to the Cherokee tribe as the Limmikin, French settlers as the Rougarou, and those who had established the Transylvania colony in Kentucky simply as werewolves, something ancient and deadly has walked these hills and hollers since before a time when the bluegrass made them famous. Tonight, the full moon has risen once again, and Midnight in Kentucky is back with an in-depth look at just a few terrifying experiences with Kentucky's own Dogman. Tonight, we'll confront a few recently documented encounters with one of the Commonwealth's most dangerous cryptids, including a tragic recent incident of the killing of a child in early 2020 in Knott County and the possibility of the creature's involvement, as well as take a deep dive into the storied history of the beast residence and its primordial hunting grounds here in our weird Kentucky home. Light the torches, load the silver bullets, steal your nerve, and journey with us as Midnight in Kentucky tackles Kentucky's serious werewolf problem.
Welcome to Kentucky,
the birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
That when the hour grows late, the bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the veiled witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes wrong in the bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. Ladies and gentlemen, the full moon has risen, and it is the midnight hour once again. For Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Tonight, we are talking about one of Kentucky's major problems with the paranormal and one of Kentucky's major problems in general, our werewolf population. Also referred to as upright canids, dogmen, and I've heard them referred to as the Kentucky hellhounds in a couple instances. Kentucky has a plethora, a litany, I can't think of any more synonyms, a major case history with creatures that are commonly described as looking like werewolves, the werewolves of folklore and fairy tale. We had previously recorded this episode. A lot of people responded to it. I know a couple of you guys reached out and said that you want more werewolf stories. I wasn't happy with the sound on the episode. I know there was a couple tech issues, and that's completely on me. So we pulled that episode down. We're re-recording it. This is Werewolves Redux. So if you happen to listen to that episode and you dug it, you might hear some information that you heard on that last one, but we've also got a couple new cases and a lot of new stuff in this episode, so it would definitely be worth the listen. But before we get into all of that, as always, if you are enjoying what you're hearing and you want to check out more Midnight in Kentucky goings on, please follow us on social media. We are on
Twitter,
Facebook,
midnightkentucky.com,
and the Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube channel. Hopefully by the time you guys are hearing this, there have been some new additions to the Midnight Kentucky episodes. I know that those had kind of slowed down over there. I hadn't been getting them up as I wanted to, but hoping that got started back, and there's quite a few happenings over there. So please make past Ben happy and go check out all that work that future Ben did to get those up. I think you guys will love it. There's also music from Ransom Letter Publishing artists over there. Some new podcasts coming out, may have already come out at this point. Hopefully has come out at this point. So check that out. That's the Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube channel. In addition, if you are looking for Midnight in Kentucky merch, check out the Ransom Letter Publishing TeePublic. You can find t-shirts with the official Midnight in Kentucky logo, as well as all kinds of other designs and stuff from the whole Ransom Letter Publishing team, from music and podcasts and everything. So come for the Midnight Kentucky. Maybe you'll maybe you'll find something else. We've got t-shirts, masks, hoodies, all that stuff. And we have just launched the Midnight in Kentucky Patreon. So if you're really, really digging what you're hearing about all of this weirdness in Kentucky on the main show, we have all kinds of affordable options. You can come over there and just buy us a coffee for $1. You can contribute to the show. You can donate, which we love, or you can join our tiers and get new episodes of shows, get custom t-shirts from Midnight Kentucky, get custom stickers from Midnight Kentucky. We are having bonus episodes over there. We've got Transmissions from the Abyss, which is our conversations with experiencers and hearing stories firsthand from people here in Kentucky and around the world and nation about their experiences with the unexplained. So check that out. If you can make a monetary contribution, it helps us both out. It helps the show out. It goes to production of the show and getting more weird stuff out to you guys. And you get stuff back. You get brand new content. You get brand new merchandise, exclusive merchandise. So it's definitely worth it. Helps us out. If that's something you can do, we would love you to. But we just appreciate you listening to the main show as well. Which brings us back to tonight, in which we are addressing Kentucky's major werewolf problem. There is a long, long case history of werewolves, dogman, upright canids here in Kentucky. Like me and Stephen were talking about before the show, there are so many named werewolves, from the gateway werewolf to the barilla to the Land Between the Lakes beast, to the Waddy werewolf. Those are all just in Kentucky, and that's not even the full list.
Ben, that was similar to what we was talking about in our previous episode with the huntsman. All over the whole state here in Kentucky, we have, like in the Red River Gorge, where that couple was kind of having a firefight or having experiences with this canid werewolf type creature, Dogman. And then, you go over to the western part of the state, you have Land Between the Lakes monster, you have the Spotsville monster, the Waddy werewolf. It seems like all these creatures are the same thing. We're just calling them something different in different parts of the state.
You're 100% right. There are all of these different names for all of these different werewolves all over the state, a lot of which we're going to get into tonight. But before we do that, I just wanted to bring up that werewolves, much like, and we're referring to these creatures as werewolves, and I know that has a certain connotation. But more than anything, these creatures, I love Lon Strickler's word for them, which is upright canids. They're very similar to Bigfoot-like creatures, but they have dog features, dog ears, a dog snout, and dog-like pads in a lot of cases. But these creatures have been with us since the written word. The first known werewolf is thought to have come from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which of course is one of the oldest written records that we have in human existence. And then in Greek mythology, there's the legend of Lycan, who, lycanthrope, the scientific name for the disease of thinking you're a werewolf, which has also contributed to the supposedly fictional lycanthrope. But as we're going to find out, they're not all so fictional. So in Greece we have the myth of Lycan, and we have stories passed down into the Viking Age about werewolves, and particularly in Europe, in Germany and France, we have all kinds of stories from the 15th and 16th century of people who are supposedly werewolves, much like the witch trials here in America. And I don't know that those people were werewolves, but that establishes a precedent. That establishes a precedent for this type of activity and where these beliefs come from. And maybe there were werewolves in those cases. I don't know. But bringing it into Kentucky, and you may know a little more about this than I do, but Kentucky was once named, before it took on the name Kentucky, Transylvania, which of course is a European name commonly associated with vampires, but intriguing nonetheless to be associated with werewolves.
Right. Kentucky has a lot of mysterious things like that with it. Up there in Lexington, Kentucky, there's Transylvania University.
Right,
That's there
absolutely.
for years.
I wonder if it was named Transylvania University because of Kentucky once being named Transylvania.
Yeah, and Transylvania University is one of the oldest colleges in the United States. It's one of the first colleges that's west of the Allegheny Mountains. So this goes back; it predates the state of Kentucky itself, because when Kentucky was part of Virginia, Transylvania College was here, but it was not in Lexington; it was in Bull County, which happens to be, Danville, the county seat, happens to be the birthplace of Kentucky itself. So the name Transylvania has been synonymous with Kentucky for many years, even before it was a state. And I believe Transylvania means in Latin for across the woods.
Interesting. I didn't know that Bull County was the birthplace of Kentucky.
Yeah, that's Constitution Square when you go to downtown Danville. That little park they have there is like where they signed Kentucky being a state.
And I also didn't know that Transylvania meant across the woods. That's a pretty intense meaning.
Right. Yeah, and even when the settlers first come to the New World, Kentucky itself was, pretty much covered with forests and things, and it still is for the most part. And the settlers were, I think John Murray was talking about not just in Kentucky, but when the settlers come to the United States itself, they were afraid of the forests and everything and afraid of what was in the forest. So that's when they decided to start cutting things down and clear settlements and clear the land for farming and things like that, because they didn't like the woods. They were terrified of the woods and what was in the woods.
So I had known Kentucky was named Transylvania, or the colony, that Kentucky was involved in was originally called Transylvania, but I had kind of forgotten about it. And it wasn't until I was doing research for the show and looking through Barton Noonley's Mysterious Kentucky Volume 1, which we have, referenced countlessly on the show. Barton is one of the best researchers in the paranormal community in general, and probably the best here in Kentucky. Hoping to get him on the show at some point. But he's talking about the Transylvania colony. And, I think it's interesting that name Transylvania, the European descent, we see so much of these folklores about werewolves and about dogmen from Germany and France and Europe. And before that, I'm sure they got their stories from the accounts of the Greeks, who had the story of Lycan and Zeus, and he was made into, a dog, which again, Seth Breedlove and the people at Small Town Monsters do an excellent job of going into that very briefly at the beginning of Beast of Bray Road. They talk about that piece of mythology about, where werewolves come from to the Greeks. But before that, there was the Epic of Gilgamesh. So we can see a whole lineage of experience tracing it down to Kentucky, where we have a major problem with these werewolves, where we have a dominant population of werewolves who are maybe killing our livestock and possibly our kids. But we'll get to that a little later. First, I want to read just this little paragraph from Mysterious Kentucky, Volume 1, about Transylvania and the werewolves and a supposed incident that happened in Transylvania with these things. So it says this. I knew that Kentucky was once named Transylvania, so it was no surprise that some of the older European werewolf legends may have made their long voyage from the home country to arrive here with early settlers. According to Woods, some members of the historic Transylvania Company settled here back when the country was founded. One of these renowned men was Pennsylvanian named L. Talbot, and after this man's death and interment into the Bethel Talbot Cemetery, encounters with a frightening, wolf-like humanoids began. Some even believed that the werewolf was actually Talbot himself, returned from the dead in a wolfish body to spread fear and calamity across the countryside. So, that's not exactly like the dogmen we're going to be talking about today and the dogman encounters that we're going to be referring to from here on. But I thought that story was interesting in regards to Kentucky and Kentucky's history with these things in particular. We have that European heritage, but another thing, and again, you may know more about this than I do, because I found this through researching werewolf legends in general, but Louisville was founded by a French colony of explorers, right? Those were the French explorers.
Yeah, I believe so.
So the French, as we talked about before, they had that long history of werewolf folklore and of werewolf encounters and of people being put to death because they thought they were werewolves. And they referred to this creature as the Rougarou, which it's still referred to by that name in Louisiana, where people continue to encounter these things. But I've got an article here that I wrote for our local paper on the Dogman of Kentucky a while back, and this has been reposted to the Midnight Kentucky blog, so you guys can read this in full there. I'm going to read most of it just because it offers so much on these sightings, and really breaks down the different parts of Kentucky that we're going to be getting into tonight. So if you guys want to read this in full, again, this is at the Midnight in Kentucky blog, but here goes. It would seem as though there are as many names for these upright creatures as there are areas through which their howls echo in Kentucky. In the 1600s, when the French settlers came to Louisville, they brought with them the tales of the Rougarou, a bipedal, dog-like creature with a tendency of violence toward those who witnessed it, only to find that a population of the creatures awaited them in their new home. Cherokee tribes in the area had their own stories of the Limmikin, a word borrowed from the northern tribes, particularly the Mohawk, to describe an almost identical beast. In cryptological circles, they are most often referred to singularly as the Dogman. Ultimately, however, the uncanny resemblance to what has become colloquially known as the werewolf cannot be denied. It would be the later of these monikers that would come to define a series of incidences involving the beasts in Waddy, Kentucky, dating back before the turn of the 20th century and on into the modern day. Several Waddy residents have described hearing bone-chilling screams in the area over the years, and more than a few accounts of sightings of a creature sometimes accompanied by horrific animal mutilations have come to light thanks to the reports from witnesses and inquiries performed by local Kentucky investigators. Some of the most notable accounts occurred on Ditto Road in Waddy in the latter months of 2012. On November 28th, Teresa Parker found 5 of her pet goats slaughtered savagely in what appeared to be a sport killing by a large unknown predator. These gruesome attacks would not be the end of the mutilations on Ditto Road, however, when only a week later, another anonymous farmer reported the killings of his own livestock. The local animal director at the time, Rusty Newton, admitted to being mystified by what could have performed the series of killings, as he said they didn't seem to resemble any kind of animal attacks he had ever seen. Concurrent with these incidences of animal mauling, an unnamed mother and daughter had been chased home from their evening walk by something moving incredibly quickly behind them and making an extremely unusual yelping noise. The two sought refuge in their barn until the creature supposedly departed toward a neighbor's house, who also reported hearing the strange howling noises. This sighting is consistent with another encounter with what has become known as the Waddy werewolf only a few years later in nearby Shelby County. First documented on the excellent compendium of bipedal beast sightings in the bluegrass, KentuckyBigfoot.com, and investigated by noted researcher Charlie Raymond, a homeowner in an older subdivision in Shelby County reported seeing 2 of the creatures around 11 in the evening while out walking her dog. The terrifying duo rounded a neighboring house on all fours, eventually standing on 2 feet and continuing into a wooded, undeveloped portion of the area. The witness, meanwhile, frozen in fear, close enough to see the hair standing on their backs. The report documents the jerky gait with which the things moved and an extreme silence coinciding with the event, often associated with various paranormal and supernatural phenomena. The Gateway werewolf, thusly named due to its supposed stomping grounds throughout the gateway to Appalachians, is another of the alleged creatures with whom locals report experiences dating back as long as people have settled in the area. In 1972, a squirrel hunter allegedly viciously attacked by the werewolf in Bourbon County along Hingston Creek in the early morning hours reported that the beast came at him from behind, pushed him down, and left several lacerations across his back and legs that required treatment from a local hospital. The incident spurred a local farmer to come forward with his own encounter with the werewolf, which he says had crossed the road in front of him years before. Both men describe similar attributes of the beast, including having the body of a bear with silver or grayish fur, the muzzle and face of a wolf, and humanoid hands with sharp dagger-like claws. These 2 descriptions would provide the creature with its most infamous of nicknames, the Barilla. However, These are far from the first of their kind. Native American legends in the area tell of a great white-furred monster who emerges from the mysterious hovering lights over the Appalachians to kidnap victims and return them to their glowing skycraft. Perhaps the most famous of Kentucky's supposed werewolf population is the creature or creatures known to stalk the land between the lakes region in the western portion of Kentucky. Sightings of what has become simply known as the Beast of LBL have come from several different groups of outdoor explorers, including hunters and fishermen, hikers and bikers, and Boy Scouts and campers. The wooded areas of land between the lakes are said to be littered with strange footprints, large nests covered in unknown fur that appear to be slept in, and the carcasses of deer and other animals torn apart in a way that is unnatural for predators. One of the most dramatic and violent supposed encounters of the beast of the land between the lakes comes from the early 1980s and was reported to researcher Jan Thompson. When police were called to the campsite in the backwoods of LBL, known for the abandoned military bunkers dotting the landscape, they were met by a gruesome and grisly scene. The bodies of 3 to 4 campers, a young couple and their children, were found bloodily mutilated and dismembered in a similar manner to the livestock on Ditto Road years later. It is said that one of the bodies was found in the limbs of a tree some 50 yards from the supposed attack, and that strange howling was heard by the investigators in the woods surrounding the brutality. Though the story has been met with large amounts of scrutiny online, Jan maintains that it is the true record of events, and some researchers of the Dogman phenomena believe they may have located the area in which the savagery occurred in the years since the incident. In this case, and several of the others documented here, it has been suggested that the events have been downplayed or outright covered up by authorities involved in the investigations. This is not to mention the high strangeness surrounding werewolf areas, werewolf events such as the ethereal silences and UFOs occasionally being reported in conjunction with the sightings. So that's a brief rundown of Kentucky's history with these creatures. And as you guys can see, we have plenty of history with these creatures.
Yeah, and as you can see, as you read the article there, I mean, it's all over the whole state. You have land between the lakes in the complete western part. Then, Monroe County, where, a lot of incidents has been reported in the last few years. That's kind of in South Central. Then you have Waddy, which is, up and around the Louisville, Lexington area. And then same thing with Bourbon County. And then, things we discussed in our previous episode that occurred over in the Red River Gorge and even over further in Western Kentucky. It seems like, they're all over the entire state, these sightings. And, they are accompanied by lights and things like that. They seem to be kind of another commonality, whether it be lights in the sky or orbs, in the vicinity of when these show up.
Absolutely, man, and that's a great point. We're back to the orbs, we're back to that stuff, and that was something that occurs in other states and in other high-profile sightings like this. In Pennsylvania at the Chestnut Ridge incident, which again, Small Town Monsters has an excellent documentary about, and I highly suggest to anybody listening who's interested in this type of thing. There was a major incident of these types of creatures emerging from a landed UFO, walking out of it. Some people shot at them, and they did the same thing that the wolf creature at Skinwalker Ranch did. It seemed like it didn't really affect them. So, and again, in the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, which is very close, to the Chestnut Ridge area in Pennsylvania, we have reports of UFOs and dogmen just like this. So yeah, the UFO connection, obviously I think is one of the most interesting, but here with the Gateway Werewolf, and I actually think it was you who first brought my attention to this, because I believe you had read about it in Aliens in Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. But the Gateway Werewolf, where the Native Americans have legends of this great white-furred monster who emerges from these mysterious hovering lights to kidnap victims and return them to their glowing sky craft floating over the Appalachian Mountains.
Oh, yeah, and a lot of these sightings and reports date back to the history of humans in this region. The Native Americans have, story after story, and I guess what we'd call folklore about these creatures, all over the state, as such as we do to the current day.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we still have these stories of, we still get these reports all the time as, as it goes on. Um, and I wanted to bring attention just real quickly to this story of the Gateway Werewolf about the squirrel hunter who was viciously attacked in Bourbon County along Hickston Creek one morning in 1972. He reported that the beast came at him from behind, pushed him down, and left several lacerations across his back and legs. And he went to a local hospital. This spurred a local farmer to come forward with his own encounter with the werewolf, which is considered one of the first reports of the modern era of the Gateway Werewolf. But what I thought was so interesting about this case is, of course, I found out about that case again from Barton Noonley's Mysterious Kentucky Volume 1. I can't recommend that book enough to anybody who's interested in the weird shit that happens here. It's interesting that we have these localized phenomena and these localized names for these werewolves, when in reality, they may and probably do exist or might exist all over the state. Hell, me and you are in the middle of an investigation right now with James Bunch, we've had some startling new information come up that pretty much completely validates his story. Says he at least believes himself to be telling the truth, which we can't talk about yet. We're hoping to be able to talk about that soon. But we do know where this werewolf sighting happened here in Russell County, where a school is now, which is kind of terrifying. But we've had them right here in several instances right here in Casey and Russell. Actually, the Penny Royal podcast, and the excellent podcast by Nathan Isaac, who we had on the show a year or so ago, who we're hoping to have back very soon. I believe the second episode starts out with a story about one of his friends having a sighting of a werewolf. It sounds like right there on Main Street in Somerset.
Yeah. And again, that goes back. There's just numerous tales of these sightings and these experiences with people, whether it be, out in the woods or maybe even closer into town, and, they're in Somerset, and then over here in, Russell Springs, where we're out of. And then, as I was saying earlier, Western Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, it's, seems to be a little bit of everywhere. And even back, years ago, when like Topics was a website, there were various accounts on there of people, that may not have been truthful, but there was a lot of people starting threads about seeing things in their area. And one time I kind of did like a deep dive into it and started looking at all of them. And I think there was like something like 15, 16 different counties that was had people had posted separate accounts of these sightings on there.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it a bit. And not only that, dude, but I mean, me and you sat down and talked about that at length. And it's a shame now because right as soon as all of this really high strangeness, the high strangeness, the modern era of topics got shut down, and we lost all those files. But dude, there were several threads about how dogs would go missing. Just people's animals would just go missing, and they would find bones of them and stuff all over Pike County or all over Kentucky. And that coincides with these reports of stuff like this, and in particular, the massacres in Monroe County and the massacres in Louisville, which we'll talk a little bit about on this show, but I think we're going to do a full deep dive into both of those within the next couple episodes. But that all coincides, and yeah, people talked about those types of things on Topics relentlessly. And now, and I'm not saying it was because of that. I'm not saying it was taken down because of that, but it is awfully coincidental that, we had hit years of historical logs of supposedly firsthand witness accounts, maybe not good ones, maybe not great ones. It's just a message board thread, but we could trace it back historically. And now all that information's gone.
Yeah. And it's kind of a shame. If I knew, those would be disappearing for good, I would have, got screen captures or downloaded or something. But even, when the Monroe County incidents occurred, there were some really good threads on that, and even up around the Shelbyville area, and the ones that occurred outside the area close to the zoo in Louisville. Those are just incidents that just all kind of occurred in the same time frame, within months of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was kind of the major break in these past few years in this story. Those particular instances of the massacres. And I'm not saying that a Dogman or an Upright Canaan did those things, but it definitely tracks considering where Louisville is, where Waddy is, the stories of these things all over the state. But that brings me to another story from Mysterious Kentucky Volume 1 that I wanted to share. And this one, it's a very interesting story, but the way that fate plays into the story, I think, is interesting, and it's a concept that you and I have talked about with a couple other people on the show before. And I just wanted to bring it in. I'm going to read it real quick. Again, this comes from Mysterious Kentucky Volume 1 by Barton Noonley. Can't recommend it enough. Check it out. He covers everything that we cover 10 times over what we cover it. So be sure to check the book out. But I'm going to read just this brief little account here. Several years ago, a Miss Shirley Elkins sent a letter to the Bigfoot researcher, Mr. Bill Green of the New England Bigfoot Information Center, who forwarded it to Ray Crow of the International Bigfoot Society. A letter concerned an event which took place back in April of 1944 in Paintsville, Kentucky, Johnson County. The incident is notable here not only due to the description given of the creature in question, but also in that it involved aggression in the form of a physical assault on a patient at a hospital where Elkins was working as a nurse on the night shift. She writes,
I was on night shift at the hospital in my hometown in April 1944, and that night a young man was in the waiting room to see the doctor. He was all a mess of scratches, and his mother was telling him to just say he fell down and not to mention anything about being in a fight with a tall, man-like, hairy thing. They kept him overnight at the hospital, and later that night, someone phoned us about an accident caused by a tall, hairy creature that was in the road. A year passed, and I went to work at this restaurant, and there was this man I'd seen at the hospital. He was the owner's son and became my husband on June 7th, 1945. His name was Ellis, and he later told me what had happened that rainy night back in April. It had been dark and rainy all day, my husband said. He had gone fishing and had caught a pile of catfish for the restaurant. He was out back cleaning them on a table lit by a 25-watt bulb when up from the riverbank came what looks like a man, only he was covered with dark hair, long and shaggy all over. He thought it was a teenager dressed in some outlandish costume at first, but then it growled at him, pushed him, and made grab for the fish. Ellis grabbed a bottle and promptly hit the creature, knocking it into a rain barrel that was kept outside for cleaning purposes. The creature jumped up, growled again, then grabbed Ellis and shook him like a rag doll before hurling him to the ground and running off with the fish. Mom didn't believe it. She thought the staff at the hospital would send for a shrink if I told this to them. It had small aqua-colored eyes like a cat, heavy scattered eyebrows. Looked like a young teen, only was very bushy with hair of shiny slate color, slim, long body, short legs, had large, long feet, long claw-like nails like overgrown human ones. Its tail bushed when it first saw the fish. Looked like it smiled, but still growled. It had sharp, long pointed teeth.
The creature reportedly left 5-toed footprints complete with impressions of claw marks in the mud. Although no mention is made of a muzzle or elongated snout, the other creatures The other features, such as long, sharp fangs and claws, and most especially the bushy tail, which bristle at the sight of food, seem to argue against the more mundane notion that this beast man was merely another Bigfoot. Perhaps it was a juvenile dogman, and if so, it's not the only example of an apparently immature form of these creatures to be seen in Kentucky. So again, that was from Mysterious Kentucky, Volume 1 by Barton Noonley. That's, we see this pattern of aggression over and over and over from these creatures, and particularly, either attacking somebody for food or attacking somebody for, just being out in the woods, being out in their area, or what's perceived as their area, I suppose. But another thing, and this is a little more metaphysical about instances such as these. I love this story and the fact that, this woman writes to these people and she says that she was a nurse and that she saw this kid the night he come in and had this experience where he was pushed down and attacked and beat up by this thing. And then she hears his mother telling him not to talk about it and to keep his mouth shut. And then a year later, she sees him again at the local restaurant, and he's, his mother owns the restaurant she's eating at the time. She ends up going out with this guy. They end up getting married, and he tells her this full story. Like, that's such a instance of synchronicity and circumstance. And, we continually see that with cases like this. It's like we talked about with Paul Herring on the Mysterious Huntsman episode. Maybe one of the things that these incidences do is bring us together as humans, and in a weird way, a weird twist of fate. I don't really know how to phrase it correctly, but I thought that was so interesting that this Dogman sighting, or this Dogman incident of this poor kid being attacked in 1944, led to him meeting his wife and getting married, and they just happened to meet again a year later at this restaurant where his mother owned it. And had it not been for this Dogman sighting, who knows if they would even be together.
Yeah, I mean, I never knew the Dogman himself could be a matchmaker, but that.
He's a Cupid. It's a canid Cupid.
Yeah, right. But it's, in all seriousness, these, reports and things not only are associated with, lights, orbs, lights in the sky, but also they're shrouded in synchronicity. That's another common factor to people who experience these type of phenomena with either, it be paranormal with ghosts, with cryptids, or, UFOs, any of these phenomena. Synchronicity is kind of the commonality that ties all these together.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And you're right. I mean, the synchronicities occur in all types of paranormal experiences, whether it be UFOs or dogmen or Sasquatch sightings, and it seems to loop everything together. It's just interesting how these sightings or how these experiences can happen to somebody. And not only can it change their perception of reality and change their lives because they've experienced something like that, but it can also lead to these strange twists of fate that change their lives in other ways.
Yeah. It seems like definitely, if someone has these type of experiences, like, like the guy out in the woods that was hunting for squirrels and, and was attacked by this creature, something like that is life altering. I mean, even take what happened in Kelly, Kentucky with the Hopkinsville goblins. That family, they was forever changed their fate because of, their experiences. And that seems to be the case with any of these encounters. I mean, let's take a look at, Calvin Parker, what happened to him. I mean, that just seems to be, something, when something like that happens to you, it changes your life. It's life altering, and probably for good reason, because it's, something out of the ordinary. Not just anyone has these type of experiences.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Speaking of Hopkinsville, though, that brings us right into our next encounter with these things. That was the perfect segue. This comes from Phantoms and Monsters, of course, the legendary Lon Strickler, who we talked to a couple episodes back. The proprietor of Phantoms and Monsters, one of the best researchers and investigators in the field. You know, he has compiled this event. This is from Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. It's titled Red-Eyed Upright Wolf Encountered in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And Lon writes this. Nadine Smith and her husband and son, Shane, moved into a trailer park as they waited for housing on the base. Nadine's husband was in the military and they moved around a lot. One day, Nadine and Shane were out playing in the yard when they found a dead dog. They quickly determined that it was the neighbor's dog. Sadly, the neighbors weren't around, and so they ended up burying the pooch in the woods near the tree line. The next day, they went out to check on the grave and the animal was gone. Soon after, Nadine began seeing a creature out by the tree line. It had blood-red eyes and stood, she guessed, 8 feet tall. It appeared to be a bipedal animal of some sort. She began seeing it quite frequently. Her husband assumed that she was exaggerating, but 2 or 3 weeks later, he saw it too. He saw the red eyes and also heard it grunting and groaning. He went outside with a shotgun to confront it, but the creature was gone. Nadine began to decide to ask some neighbors around the trailer park if they had ever seen anything weird in the area. Her neighbors seemed uninterested in speaking to her about it, and a few shunned her entirely. As she walked around the park one day, she spotted inside one of the abandoned and locked trailers red eyes staring back at her from the window. Whatever it was inside the trailer. Around this time, Shane began having recurring nightmares that would wake up and panic. He claimed that a creature was looking at him in the window at night. They would attempt to calm him down by telling him that it was just a nightmare and nothing more. One night, they ran into the room during one of these night terror instances, and both Nadine and her husband saw the red-eyed creature in the window looking in. Nadine described it had black, brown fur, was standing upright, and had red eyes. She noted that to her, it looked like an upright walking wolf. She decided to do some research and found out about skinwalkers and came to believe that the creature might be one. While her husband was away at work, Nadine, too scared to stay alone, asked a friend to stay over. One night during this time, they heard guttural growls coming from outside as well as noises. Both women looked out the door and observed an upright walking black wolf with red eyes looking back at them. Nadine noted that it appeared angry and bolted in their direction. They went inside. Just then, their 14 by 8 foot trailer began to shake violently. As they were preparing to call the police, everything stopped. They opened the door and the creature was gone. Nadine and her husband decided that it was probably best just to move, and they packed their things and drove off. They were in such a haste to get away from the area, they ended up leaving some of the furniture behind. Nadine's husband claims that even on the last day while packing the car, he could see the red eyes watching him from the tree line. So again, that comes from Phantoms and Monsters, with which Midnight in Kentucky is an affiliated researcher. Kudos to Lon for compiling all these encounters like he does. I'm continually impressed. But this case is interesting in a lot of ways, man. First, let's take it back to where we're at. Hopkinsville, Kentucky, land of the little green men. And we see so many parallels between that infamous case and this case.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, those are, people being harassed, by some type of creature. It's in the same area. It's pretty close to not a mirror image, but it's, the similar type of story of people being kind of forced out of their homes because of being harassed by these type of creatures.
Yeah, 100%. And think about this. The fact that this creature was staring in the window at the kid. That's verbatim what happened in Kelly, right outside of Hopkinsville in 1955.
Yeah, that's identical. With the eyes glowing and seeing it off afar. It almost seems like it's the same type of behavior. That's kind of what I was thinking while you was reading that. It sounds, very similar in the same behavior, of these creatures. And even, kind of what we was talking about on the previous episode, like people shooting at these things, like, even like they did there in Hopkinsville, it doesn't seem to faze them. There's no way of really taking them down.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought it was interesting that she said that none of her neighbors really wanted to talk to her about it because back in the day, I was 9 or 10. Um, as I'm sure everyone listening to the podcast knows, and of course, I was a pretty weird kid. So for my birthday that year, I asked to go to Hopkinsville, to Kelly, Kentucky, because I was, it was within our reach. I wanted to see it. I couldn't make it to Roswell. I could make it to Kelly, Kentucky. So I went, and, for such an infamous case, for one of the most famous cases of all time, the 1955 Hopkinsville incident involving, the little green men and stuff, where we get the term little green men from. Nobody in Hopkinsville either A, wanted to talk about it, or B, knew about it. Now that was 1999, 2000, 2001, between 2000 and 2003, I would say. And now, of course, Hopkinsville, Kelly, Kentucky has a festival devoted to the little green men. So things have changed as perspective has changed on these types of things all over the world. But, back then, it was very much like this witness describes in this story. Nobody wanted to talk about it, and people actually seemed kind of angry when you brought it up.
Right. It seems like they have some type of stigma attached to them. And, thankfully, in the last several years, there's been more acceptance and understanding and I guess, intrigue about these type of events and reports. But it seems like, we go back to the, before the early 2000s, and it was kind of one of those things people did not want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess Geraldine Sutton, daughter of Lucky Sutton, one of the experiencers in the Hopkinsville encounter, who we talked to, I guess last fall, or it was actually on the anniversary of the Kelly, Kentucky incident. She mentions that Hopkinsville, that Kelly, though they've carved out a place for it, and though they've carved out this little festival, and there's people that are embracing it now, was not always as receptive to its past as it currently is.
Yeah, and I think she's one of definitely the leads on getting everything set up over there in Kelly, Kentucky, and having the Little Green Man Days festival, because I think without people like her, kind of taking the lead on this, we would still be kind of have that stigma attached to it, and people kind of not wanting to discuss it, or maybe even being afraid of what they don't know or what they don't understand.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And it's interesting because I'm recording right now in my living room through Zoom, and I have my mic propped up on a stack of books. And I just happened to look down while we were talking about, and one of those books is The Kelly Incident by Anna Carl, which you and Tide bought for me several Christmases ago. I guess that's not such a strange coincidence, considering that we talk about this shit frequently, but it's kind of weird.
Yeah. I mean, that is where it's just kind of shows you how everything kind of ties in together once you start paying attention to the phenomena.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But moving on, we can't not talk about the beast of the land between the lakes in this episode. This is perhaps the most well-known of Kentucky's werewolves and has the most lore and history associated with it. As I said in the article here, Jan Thompson is one of the premier researchers of the Land Between the Lakes beast itself. And her story, again, is documented complete in Mysterious Kentucky Volume 1. She had a incident with the Land Between the Lakes beast back in the 70s when she was a teenager, and has been researching this thing from then on. I've tried to reach out to Jan Thompson. I don't know if she's on social media or I can't find her online. I would love to speak with her. We'd love to have you on the show. So if anybody hearing this can get us in touch with her or can get a message to her, let us know. That would be awesome. But one of the things in particular that she talks about with the Beast of Land Between the Lakes, and one of the most, as it says in the article, most dramatic and violent encounters with it, supposedly happened in the early 1980s. And this family, a husband and wife and 2 young children, were brutally slaughtered and mutilated by this thing. And investigators came to the scene and found body parts strewn through the trees, strewn about the property. And they, supposedly are hearing howls in the distance of a creature they don't know what it is. And the descriptions of the bodies are very similar to the livestock on Ditto Road, the llamas in Louisville back in 2019. And to a lot of the massacres we have here in Kentucky. And unfortunately, the child who was killed at the beginning of this year, very similar description to the scene. So the Land Between the Lakes beast is definitely described as one of the most aggressive and one of the most really one of the most documented of these creatures. Like, it's in the Land Between the Lakes, this thing is well known and well talked about.
Yeah, I mean, even back when we was at Crypticon, we had conversations with people about the Land Between the Lakes monster. And the Land Between the Lakes is an interesting area. There's a lot of things that goes back there, and these people were attacked and murdered. And I guess I don't know if their house is still standing back there or not. But the history of the Land Between the Lakes is back when they built Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake there, which forms their line between the lakes. They were both kind of rivers, and they, during the time period of when we was building, lakes in the area, like we have Lake Cumberland here, and then Green River Lake. They was damming rivers and creating lakes. A lot of people did not want to leave their homes over in that area, and they were kind of forced out by the government of that region. And you kind of hear these stories a lot of times when the government or whoever is coming in and trying to take people's homes or even maybe destroy nature in a way. There's always some type of creature or some type of incident like this that's attached to those types of things. It's almost like there's some type of energy there that it seems like maybe these creatures are manifested from that negative energy that's created, during these types of projects or destruction of the environment. And even like we was discussing, the Red River Gorge, there's even been talks for years of trying to move in and develop that area. And then, you start seeing these creatures over there. And, these events go back to even the settlers, like I mentioned earlier, kind of trying to clear the woods and cut things out. And it always seems like when they do that, in a way, Mother Nature maybe fights back with these creatures. I'm not saying that's what I believe, but that is something maybe to take into account.
That is a very good point, man. I had never thought about that before. Maybe these creatures are elementals. Maybe these creatures are ethereal creatures that are products of, that's a very, very good point. And it does seem like paranormal activity is intensified around places like that, for sure. The beast of Land Between the Lakes in particular, like you were talking about, we met a pair of researchers from the Cryptid Studies Institute last year at Crypticon. And again, we're hoping to have them on at some point. I know they're going through a lot right now with some sickness in the family, but I had reached out to them earlier this year and things just didn't work out as 2020 has gone. But both of those guys and girls and lady are very knowledgeable about this whole Land Between the Lakes region and about this whole Land Between the Lakes beast. And they have said that they think they may know where this incident with the killing of this family has occurred. And they have also said, as we've heard from other researchers, that they believe that there is a war going on in the Land Between the Lakes region between the Dogmen and the Sasquatch-like creatures, which is very interesting. And as the article said, the wooded areas of the Land Between the Lakes are said to be littered with strange footprints and large nests covered in unknown fur that appear to be slept in, and the carcasses of deer and other animals torn apart in a way that's unnatural for predators. So there's quite a bit of physical evidence of these things over there, quite a bit of lore of these things over there, and it seems like they're violent. They're violent creatures, and that goes into some incidences we're going to talk about in just a second.
Yeah, it does seem like there are some type of violent actions reported with these creatures, whether it be, killing livestock or attacking humans, or even just this harassment of, trying to run people out of their homes or out of the area.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there was a sighting of the Land Between the Lakes beast this year. Again, reported from Phantoms and Monsters on Monday, March 30th, 2020. The title of this is 7-foot upright canine recently observed at the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area in Kentucky. And I'm not going to read this story. Basically, a mother, a friend, and her son were walking down the trail, and in front of them appeared this 7-foot tall canine creature. So, this is something that is ongoing. This is something that is continually happening right now.
Yeah, even just, the last few months, there's been reportings of that. And I'd have to say the Land Between the Lakes monster seems to be the most reported cryptid creature, in Kentucky, has probably the most number of sightings altogether in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely agree with that. And dogmen in general seem to be one of our most reported cryptids. I mean, we hear a lot about the Hopkinsville goblins, which obviously, they're related in some way, or they're at least related by sightings in the same area. But I feel like upright canids could be the official mascot for Kentucky cryptids.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It seems to be the most common reported type creature, whether it be, the Land Between the Lakes monster, the Spotsville monster, the reports over in Eastern Kentucky, the Waddy Werewolf. It goes on and on. I mean, it's similar creatures. They just go by different names in whatever part of the state that you're seeing these in.
Absolutely, 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 and all of these things, these talk of these creatures being aggressive and being so violent, this family killing in the Land Between the Lakes region, that brings us sadly to the events of February 18th, 2020, in which a 13-year-old boy was killed supposedly by one of these creatures in Knott County, Kentucky.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I seen the story on the news, it was kind of like shocking, and I think it goes back to one of those, police reports, kind of like what happened in Monroe County, where there's a disagreement, and the official report versus what really the evidence says happened.
Absolutely, absolutely, and there are links to both the Louisville llama slaughters and the Monroe County massacres, as well as the killing of the family in the Land Between the Lakes. All three of those events are very, very similar. Again, this report comes from Phantoms and Monsters, compiled by Lon Strickler. This is on Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. The title of this article is Canine Creature Mauling Connected to Possible Dogman Reports Near Louisville, Kentucky? And I'm going to read this. I'm going to go ahead and read this because he does a very good job of linking all this together. In January of 2019, I heard a disturbing sounding call in a section of a park across from my school. In February, there was an attack on a herd of llamas on a farm beside the Louisville Zoo. The investigation as to what caused the attack is still ongoing. A week later, 2 donkeys were killed about 5 miles away. Then some sheep were found either dead or missing in a farm outside the city. Recently, it's been discovered that there was speculation that a group of dogs could have killed the llamas. However, upon further investigation, I have found that this can be ruled out due to the territorial nature of the llamas, as well as the mention of the bite marks around the ears and flanks. This can also be ruled out as dog attacks, primarily around the neck, as it does the most damage and can kill the opponent easily and quickly. Upon examination of similar reports around the same time, as well as similar posts I have found on social media, I have come to the conclusion of 2 things. The first is that whatever this creature is, it is most likely originated around Brandenburg, or for non-Kentuckians, that's about an hour outside the city, as there have been sightings of a suspicious creature around that area. Again, we come back to sightings of these things all over the state. The second is that this creature is most likely a dogman due to the speed and stealthiness the creature appears to be hunting at. Then I came across this post on social media. A 13-year-old boy was killed this past Tuesday in Knott County. I've been following the stories, trying to stitch together the evidence to make some sense of it all. He was staying at a relative's house and familiar with the area. Playing in the backyard, relative called 911 at 6 p.m. saying the boy was being attacked by a canine-type creature. First responders on the site at 6:30, the 911 caller directed them up the mountain beside the house. They had difficulty getting to the mountainside because of the steep, slick terrain, but found the boy dead 300 to 400 feet straight up the rain-slick mountain. State trooper reported something is out there. Coroner confirmed boy was killed by a canine-type creature, but can't identify what exactly. The latest reports are canine creature. No wolves in Kentucky for decades. A full-grown 40-pound coyote can't drag a 100-pound dead body up a mountainside. No mountain lions in Kentucky. A feral dog or even several feral dogs aren't dragging 100 pounds of dead weight up a mountainside. Not a bear. Coroner has been determined cause of death to be a canine-type creature. The funeral was yesterday. I have communicated with the relative who set up a GoFundMe page and 3 different reporters. All say canine creature. Coroner has had ample time to test DNA. Known animals would be easily identified if they aren't saying what it was that killed the boy. A bear or mountain lion are the only 2 animals I know of that could kill a human and have the strength to drag him 100 yards up a rain-slick mountainside. But it wasn't a bear or a mountain lion. Coroner said canine creature killed him. Authorities are asking neighbors to be hyper-vigilant of their surroundings. Google 13-year-old boy killed by animal attack, Kentucky. The story will most likely fade into the black with no official ID of the animal or creature that killed him. So here we are. We were recording this in December of 2020. This happened in February of 2020. And as this poster says, no identification of the creature. Story has faded to black. This is an interesting one, if not if an absolutely saddening incident. But I would like to point out that the poster does say that there are no wolves or mountain lions in Kentucky, and that's not exactly true. There are wolves and mountain lions in Kentucky. Maybe not a decent population, but there are. But as they mentioned on down in the article, the coroner, the relative, and the first responders have all said canine-like creature. And there are not many animals that have the strength to pull a dead human body up a 100 yards of a rain-slick mountainside.
Yeah, I can't think of very many creatures in Kentucky that would have the strength to do something like that. I mean, of course, there are animal attacks that do happen, but this one's very peculiar, especially since the body was dragged, up a mountain and, with 100 pounds. Even, of course, the go-to on a lot of these incidents, even when someone's attacked or, livestock's attacked, is dogs. A pack of dogs did it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And also, it's kind of interesting why the coroner wouldn't do some type of DNA testing or trying to pin down, because if there was something, a pack of dogs or whatever, that would be more reason to test. And that way you can warn the people, the residents, and be like, hey, we need to find this, and prevent this from happening again.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. But this is very, very much like the Monroe County massacres of the animals and the killings of the llamas. Both of those cases, um, you know, we have seen, um, we have seen pretty much nothing come from that other than the pack of dogs excuse, which I feel is pretty flimsy. Both those stories have faded into blackness.
Yeah, and even the one in Monroe County was interesting because you had the Fish and Wildlife trying to pass the cause of, the Mullins of the livestock as being a pack of dogs, but then the sheriff of Monroe County was pushing back and saying that's not true. They're not being truthful. There's something else that caused these.
I had forgotten about that. That's right. That's right. And there's more that in particular, those get very interesting, but we'll save that for the full episode on those two slaughterings. But you know, back to this child being killed. Um, it is, as I was reading that story, it is interesting that we're months removed from that, and nothing else has come about the case. It's basically just canine creatures.
Yeah, and it's the news media, out of Lexington and Louisville that covered the story initially. They're not, going to put that out there or try to investigate that because again, there's that stigma attached to it, and probably the family doesn't want things to be brought up or investigated on this. They probably want to have closure, but the officials once again are kind of just not wanting to look in areas that need to be looked into to have some type of answer, or at least not a scientific answer of what happened on that day and what killed that young child, or the teenager, I guess I could say.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, I guess now we can kind of start breaking it down to our final thoughts on the issue. And as I have said many times, and some of them humorously, but as we can see from this incident that we were just talking about, Kentucky has a major werewolf problem, a major upright canid problem, a major dogman problem. It's a problem. I mean, if a family camping in the land between the lakes was killed, if this teenager was killed, if these animals are being killed, the animals are enough. But if families are being killed by these things, if kids playing outside are being killed by these things, um, we need to start taking it a little more seriously than what they are. And that's a complete understatement. This has been happening for what seems like centuries. And I'm not sure there's anything we can do to stop it. I'm not sure we can stop these things. But the first step is acknowledging that we have a long history with these types of creatures here, and that they have a proclivity for being violent toward us and violent toward our animals and our livestock.
Right. And it seems like these, events are handed down, back from the Native Americans, the first people, known to live in the area. And even up into modern day, we're still getting these reports, even back in the earlier days of Land Between the Lakes, there's the reports. Over in Eastern Kentucky, there's reports of them. And, as we go up to last year of 2020, there's reports. So, I mean, these are probably not going to stop. And you're right. I don't know if there's any way to stop these type of attacks from occurring, or if there's a way to know definite what's causing them, because they seem to elude any type of detection, or at least maybe we could try to detect what's going on, be a little bit more proactive when these events happen. And I'm talking about the officials here that investigate these things. Like the Fish and Wildlife officers and the officers who investigated the Mullen of the young boy, it just seems, like something needs to be looked into and try to identify and even, gather DNA for the next time this happens. And then you can match it up and say, this is what happened. I mean, we would do that in any other type of incident of someone was killed and we didn't know what killed them. They just found dead somewhere. We would gather DNA evidence. And I think that's what needs to occur, even when livestock is killed. And hopefully no other humans are hurt or killed by these creatures in the future, but there's the possibility exists since it's happened before.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as many times as this has happened before at this point, I mean, we've seen it happen at least twice here on record. And of course, I know that the skeptics will argue, well, we don't know that family was killed by Dogman. We don't even know that there was a family who was killed. But the thing is that's a prominent story. And if they're willing to cover up, just that these animal attacks and that this kid being killed, or at least not touch the fact that these things happened, who's to say what they were not touching and keeping under wraps in the early 80s and the early 70s, and probably before that.
Yeah, and I hate to be conspiratorial here, but it does seem like there is some type of not wanting to acknowledge or not even wanting to look into when these events occur, just kind of write them off as being wild dogs. It kind of reminds me of the go-to thing or go-to explanation. Even when we hear these mystery booms, it's always tannerite. When these maulings happen, it's always wild dogs, and and there's no evidence for either of those.
Absolutely. You are 100% correct. But that goes back to our human nature of wanting to deny and deny and deny and deny. And I will say one thing for the coroner's cause of death, canine creature. At least there's no denial in that. At least the coroner's saying, look, we know what it is. We can't do anything about it. And really that reduces us back to those terrified settlers who came here and wanted to chop down the woods because there was monsters in it. We can't really do anything about these things. It's a problem. It's killing people. It's happening, but we've not come much further in solving it than when we were Transylvania.
Very well said. Yeah, I mean, we have not come very far. We may have come far in other areas, but as far as understanding this phenomena and understanding what's, doing these killings, every few months or every, once or twice a year, there's reports of this. We have not come any closer to discovering the cause of these or even having, much of an understanding of what we're dealing with.
Very, very well said. Very well said, my good friend. That's going to do it for Midnight in Kentucky this evening. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hope you got something out of it. As always, if you're liking what you're hearing, if you're interested in this old Kentucky weirdness, follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, midnightinkentucky.com, and of course the Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube channel. Leave us ratings and reviews, like us or not. Those ratings and reviews help us get us new followers, help boost our ratings, help boost our plays. Check out the Ransom Letter Publishing TeePublic for all your Midnight in Kentucky merch. We got t-shirts, hoodies, masks, all that good junk. And check out the newly launched Patreon. If you want some bonus episodes, if you want some exclusive merchandise, we got all that over there for very low costs. It helps the show out tremendously. It helps me and Steven out tremendously. And we appreciate it. We appreciate you guys. Till the next moon rises, not else. For Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Good night.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.